Hi there, this is a quick demo of a module that I wrote last week called SentryOneTools. In my previous blog post I wrote an article on how to check SentryOne requirements. So any targets that you monitor, do they meet all the firewall rules, requirements and permissions? So have a look through that. There's a little video in there that demonstrates that. After writing that, I decided to write some more functions to register a SentryOne target with SentryOne so that it is being watched, and then another one to query SentryOne to make sure that a list of servers are being registered and watched. So I'll just take you through those now quickly, just do a quick tour. The code is on GitHub. There's the address there, Mark Allison git/SentryOneTools. We've got some documentation so you can have a look through the docs here. All of the documentation's in there. I won't go through it here. This video is just going to demo it in action. So let's go to Visual Studio Code. In the debug ps1 file is a script which will show it in action. So the functions are essentially wrappers around the SentryOne modules, which you can find in this location here if you use the defaults. So let's import that module by pressing F8 in Visual Studio Code. So that's been imported, and then we'll connect to this server here, which is where my SentryOne database is installed, and that connects to SentryOne. And then just as a test, we can see the configuration, and there's information about that installation. So let's disconnect. So this is the PowerShell module that the module that I wrote wraps around. So let's scroll down. Now, to get this to work, you will need to install the SQL-server module that basically allows you the functions to use invoke SQL-cmd, because it does need to query the SQL-server database. I've already run that, so let's move down and let's import the module. So the module is in this directory here, sql repos SentryOneTools. So let's import that module. So first of all, let's set the location. Can't find the path because it does not exist. That was the old location. So let's change that. So let's set the location. Then we're going to import the module. And just so you can see what commands we have available, we've got register SentryOne target, test, which is the function I showed you last week, and this new one here, test SentryOne target is watched. That will query SentryOne just to make sure that the targets that you've specified are actually being watched by SentryOne. Okay, so I've got a list of servers in this serverlist.json file here. So I'm going to add Daffodil, Wisteria and Violet. Daffodil has two named instances. One of them is using SQL authentication, one with Windows. Violet is on a different subnet. I've got all the firewall ports open, so that should add fine. I've also added in here the SentryOne server name and the SentryOne database name. So let's import that JSON file. And now let's just have a quick look at the targets. So the targets in there, you can see that's basically the JSON file that we just imported. So what we're going to do is we're going to test, first of all, that all of those servers can be monitored. So let's bring this up a bit so we can see the output better. So here we go. So this line here is going to read the JSON file and put it in this variable here called servers, where they're going to get the servers.targets, which is this PowerShell, this output here, and we're going to pipe that into the test SentryOne target function, a bit like we did last week, and then we can test to see if that worked or not. So let's read the file in, which we've just done. Now let's test that all of those targets can be read and monitored by SentryOne. So it's now going off and it's querying all of those target servers. So that seems to take a long time. So let's have a look at the result. and we can see that Daffodil passed, Wisteria passed, both Daffodil instances passed, and Violet failed. So it failed to connect to SQL Server. So let's have a look at Violet. I think what's happened is it got patched the last time I looked at Violet, and there we go, we've got a manual start mode, SQL Server. The Windows operating system got patched, got rebooted automatically, and SQL Server is not running. So let's start SQL now. And let's get SQL Agent running, because Sentry One uses that as part of its monitoring. And now if we run this again, that should work fine. So now if we check the results, now we can see that the SQL Server is being monitored, or can be monitored. So this line here just shows you which one's failed. I should have run that before, never mind. Okay, what you can do now is, if you want to, you can test this and you can pipe out the results to different CSV files if you want. If you've got a lot of servers and you want to know which ones failed and which ones didn't, you can do that. So let's go and register all the servers. So now that we know that the servers can be monitored in full mode, let's go ahead and take that JSON file, the server list here, and let's register all of those servers in Sentry One. So if I show you the Sentry One site here, the default site, we've got nothing monitored at the moment, and we've got nothing in the production one either. That was just a test one. So let's try that now. So let's press F8 to run this line, which will register all of the servers in Sentry One. And then afterwards we can check the result. So I wait for that to come back, and then I can hit the result button. Sorry, highlight the result and run that. So hopefully that should all have worked. So let's have a look at the result output. And we can see that they're all passed here. This is the output. So Daffodil instance A was registered. The instance was registered, it is watched, and the instance is watched. That's what all of those means. So all of those passed. If you've got a lot of servers to look at, you can simply run this line of code here, which will let you know which ones failed. So nothing failed. Now, if we go to Sentry One, we can see, if we click on the default site, that these servers are now being gathered. Because these circles next to the name don't have anything in them, that means that Sentry One is currently gathering information about each of the instances. So if we give it a few minutes, we'll come back and then check to see if those instances are monitored properly. So I've given it a little bit of time, not that much to be honest, and now we've got little green triangles in there, which means that that's all good. So if we look at one of them, this one here has got 2 instances monitored using SQL authentication. If we try and look at the performance data, we should see that that is being monitored correctly, and it is. And if we look at instance B, that's good. Instance A is good, so that's all being monitored. So now if we run this function here, test Sentry One target is watched against all of the servers, we can check without having to manually click through and expand all of those nodes in the tree. We can simply run this line of code here and have a look at the result, find out if any of them are not being watched, and that no results came back. You can also find out if they're being monitored, if the instance is watched by Performance Advisor and Event Manager. And just to show you the full results, we can see that they are all being watched. So that's it. I've included some unit tests, so let's run those now, just so you can see what the output looks like. Now for the unit tests, I've created a validation list JSON file. This file is a list of servers that we want to validate against. So you can validate so that the unit tests don't have any server names hard-coded in, it just reads this JSON file in. And we can see that one of the tests failed, obviously because I'm doing a video. One of them is in limited mode, but was expected to be limited mode. Okay, so one of my unit tests, the Violet instance, this one here I showed you earlier that was stopped. I normally have the firewall rules set so that that can't be monitored in full mode. So that test normally will return limited, but it's actually in full mode. So I'm glad that test failed because that's what it should have done. And then if you run these unit tests, the register Sentry One. So what this test does is it tests to ensure that all of the servers are not registered when you first run it. So I've written this line of code here to remove, to unwatch all of the computers and connections from Sentry One. This unit test requires that to be done first. So I probably should add that to the test, to be honest. I haven't got around to doing that yet. So what it does is it registers all of these servers and then tests them to see if they're being watched. So that's that one there. And as we can see that all of the other tests passed because they are registered and they are being watched. But the first test failed because that is a check to make sure that Sentry One was empty first. So I'll leave it there. I won't go over this. I won't rerun that test again. You can play with that yourself if you like. Hope it's useful for you people there with large estates and you've just got Sentry One in. I'm going to expand, add a few more functions to this. I'll let you know on the blog when I do that. So this post, I haven't actually published the post at the time of making the video, but I will send it to sabin.io/blog and it will appear after this one here, how to check Sentry One requirements. So thanks for watching.